Hey guys, welcome to my 5th YouTube video. I'm back again reading the next 3 chapters of Sob.it by Sarah Weeks. I do have a video. I will link it in the description below. It's the first 3 chapters, so that was really fun. We get an introduction of the characters, things like that. A little update up to this point. We've met Bernadette, who is our neighbor. We've also met Mama, so she's very curious. She has a handful of words that she says, and we're on the quest to find out what Tzuf means. So let's get started. Chapter 4, Tzuf. When Bernadette first started coming to our apartment, she said it was practically empty. There were a few pieces of mismatched furniture, some clothes hanging in the closets, odds and ends in the kitchen drawers and cupboards, a couple of baby things, a box of juji fruits, but not much else. She looked around for anything that might have a name on it, a letter or an address book, a purse or a wallet, but there was nothing. She said that it was as though Mama and I had dropped out of the sky. I'm not sure if Bernadette was a natural-born pack rat, or if it was out of necessity that she never threw anything away. Until the time I was old enough to go downstairs to take out the trash, if something didn't fit down the disposal or couldn't be cut up and flushed down the toilet, she pretty much had to hang on to it. She had enough furniture crammed into her apartment to furnish Mama's and my place easily without ever making a dent in her own clutter. A lot of what we lived with was patched up or held together with duct tape, but as Bernadette said, there was no sense in tossing stuff out that was PF, perfectly fine. Bernie asked Mama lots of questions after she found us, but even if Mama had understood the questions, Bernie quickly learned she didn't have the words to answer them. The only information Bernadette could manage to get out of Mama was our names, Heidi and Sob.it. So that's what Mama told Bernie her name was, Sob.it. Bernadette couldn't believe that was right, so she asked again and again, but the answer was always the same, Sob.it. Mama couldn't read or write her name, so it was Bernie who decided how it should look on paper. Every person deserves to have a proper first and last name, and if there's a middle initial to plunk down between them, all the better, she said. So Mama became Sob.it, and her last name, strange though it was, became mine as well. It. When I turned 5, which is about the time most kids start kindergarten, I didn't go to school. Bernadette decided to keep me home and teach me herself. I never wondered why I wasn't doing what all the other 5-year-olds were doing, because I didn't know. I didn't know any other 5-year-olds. In fact, I didn't know any kids at all, except for Xander. Xander was short for Alexander. He was a few years older than me, and he was fat. Bernadette told me it was rude to call people fat even if they were, but considering what he called me the first time I met him, I felt fine about it. I was downstairs taking the trash. "What's a retard?" I asked Bernadette when I got upstairs. In music, it's pronounced retard, short for Italian retardando, which means slowing down, she said. "What does it mean when it's pronounced retard and somebody says it about you in English?" I said. "It usually means the person saying it is a dimwit." Is Xander downstairs a dimwit?" I asked. "I expect he is," she said. Truthfully, Xander wasn't very smart, and because of my first impression with him wasn't that he was very nice either, I avoided him. Then one day, on another trash run, I came across him sitting on the stairs, and out of the blue, he offered me a Twinkie from one of the 2 packs he was eating. Bernadette didn't allow junk food in the house. She said it was a waste of money, and besides that, bad for your gray matter. Xander loved junk food. Xander also liked to squish ants between his fingers, but most of all, he liked to talk. Relatable. Over time, we developed a little ritual, Xander and I. We would meet downstairs every afternoon at 3:15 when he got home from school and hang out on the front stoop. There were a lot of things I didn't really like about Xander. He talked rough, he didn't always smell good, and I didn't like what he did to those ants, but I did like to listen to him talk. The way it worked with us was that as soon as we sat down, Xander would give me a handful of whatever junk he was eating that day to keep me busy. Then he'd launch into one of his stories. He loved to tell stories. He had some favorites he'd tell over and over, like the one about finding a bag of $100 bills on the sidewalk and burying it in a butter tin out in the woods. He also liked to brag about his father being a war hero. Upstairs with Bernadette, talking with Easy. We told each other what we thought or how we felt or something interesting we figured out. Words traveled in straight lines. But when Xander talked, 9 times out of 10 he was bending the truth to within an inch of its life. After each whopping fib, he'd say, "It's the God's truth. Swear on my mother's spit." And I would solemnly nod to let him know I believed every word he said. I was no dummy. I knew Xander was lying like a rug, but I didn't want him to stop. I was fascinated by his fibbing. Bernadette had told me that people lie when the truth is too hard to admit. So each day, as I sat there nibbling my snack with my eyes locked right on Xander's face, I was only listening with half my brain. The other half was busy trying to figure out the truth. Xander was in the 3rd grade when I met him. He went to Scarlet Elementary over on the south side. When Bernadette decided not to send me to school, she told me if anyone ever asked, I was being homeschooled. We had school every morning at the kitchen table. In the very beginning, Mama would sit with us too, especially when we were working on letters. But after a while, I'd learned all my letters and my numbers too. So while I moved on to other things, mornings became Mama's coloring time. Bernadette bought Mama all kinds of coloring books, and we had a big shoebox full of crayons. Mama loved to color. She didn't stay inside the lines, and she only used one color for each drawing, but was happy, and it kept her occupied while Bernie taught me. "Blue," Mama would call out to us from the other room each time she finished a drawing. "You go, Picasso," Bernie would call back. Mama used all the crayons, yellow and pink and my favorite color, purple, but no matter what color she used, she called it blue. Sometimes I worried that maybe the reason Mama only had one word for colors was that she only saw one color. It made me sad to think that Mama's world might have no pink or yellow or purple in it. But I knew Mama loved me, even though she didn't have the words to tell me, so I decided the same thing was true of colors. Just because she didn't have the words for them doesn't mean she couldn't see them. In the afternoons, after school, Mama and I often went out to do the shopping and run errands. Bernadette would give us a list of things to do. Some of the words on the list would be spelled out in big block letters. Bread, milk, eggs. But if there was something I couldn't read yet, like juji fruits, she'd draw a little picture of it for me. At first, we could only go places that didn't require crossing any streets, because neither Mama nor I knew how to do it safely. Later, Bernadette made us practice street crossing by laying towels across the kitchen floor and teaching us to look both ways before we walked over them. Mama was happy to hold my hand, and she looked both ways too, but I could tell she didn't know what she was supposed to be looking for. I got to know some nice people outside, the cashiers at the grocery store, Frances and Kathy, and later the librarian at the public library, Mrs. Koppelman. Sometimes, when Mama and I were out, we would see kids who looked like they might be about my age. I remember thinking that it would have been nice to play with them, but whenever we stopped in the park to swing or sit on the bench or feed breadcrumbs to the squirrels, the kids would whisper and move away from us. You couldn't really tell about Mama's brain just from looking at her, but it was obvious as soon as she spoke. She had a very high voice like a little girl, and she only knew 23 words. I know this for a fact because I kept a list of the things Mama said tacked to the inside of the kitchen cabinet. Most of the words were common ones like good and more and hot, but there was one word only my mother said: Tzuf. "What do you think it means when she says it?" I would ask Bernadette. "Only your Mama knows that," she'd tell me each time I asked. That word Tzuf became like a little burr sticking in my head, pricking me so I couldn't forget it was there. I found myself thinking about it more and more. "There must be some way to find out what it means," I'd say to Bernie. "Not necessarily, Heidi." "Well, it has to mean something, or Mama wouldn't say it. She knows what it means." "Maybe so, but that doesn't mean you ever will. Believe me, Heidi, there are some things in life a person just can't know." The thing is, I didn't believe her, and I know a lot was going to happen before I would. Bernadette talked to my mother the same way she talked to her cats. It sounded almost like singing. "Precious bouquet! Oh, where is my precious bouquet?" She called every morning when she came through the connecting door to help Mama up and dressed. Getting Mama going in the morning used to be hard, before she learned to brush her own teeth and comb her hair. It got easier along the way, except that it was always hard to predict when Mama was going to cook up a royal rimple or hoist a foible, as Bernie also sometimes called it. I think we both felt better knowing we had each other there just in case. Precious Bouquet, or usually just Precious, is what Bernadette called Mama. If God forbid, so be it, is her true given name, I hope to heaven I never meet the person who gave birth to a gentle soul like your mama and slapped a no-name kind of name on her like that. It's just plain cruel, Bernie said. Why is it cruel? I asked. So be it means the same thing as amen. Like in the Bible? Yes, in fact it's the very last word in the Bible. Amen. That's when you say when something's over and done with, Heidi. Sort of like, the end, I said? Exactly, said Bernadette. So be it. The end. In my mind, the beginning of a life, especially if it seems destined to be a challenging one, deserves a most promising name you can come up with. A beginning kind of name, like Dawn, or Hope, or Aurora. Is Heidi a promising name, I asked. She smiled at me and touched my cheek. Filled to the brim with promise, she said. At any rate, I imagine it was your mother's mother who had the sad notion to give your mama her name, and I'll tell you something. If ever I meet up with your Grammy, I'm going to give her such a piece of my mind. I know it's strange, but until Bernadette mentioned my Grammy like that, I hadn't thought to wonder if I had one. Bernadette always said that it was as if Mama and I had dropped from the sky, and up until then, I guess I just figured that we had. Has Mama got a mother? I asked. Everybody's got a mother, she answered. Where is she then? That's another question entirely, she said. What's the answer? I asked. Bernadette laughed. I'm not going to tell you there isn't one, because I know you well enough by now to know that you'll get your panties in a twist, Heidi-ho. People don't just disappear off the face of the earth without somebody noticing, do they? I asked. Not usually, no, Bernadette said softly. Bernadette was a big list maker, and once she had me reading and writing on my own, she got me into the habit of making lists too. Mostly hers were shopping and to-do lists. Some of mine were like that too, keeping track of things, like Mama's vocabulary list on the cupboard door. But I made other kinds of lists too. One of the very first ones I remember was called Things I Know About Mama. There wasn't much to it. Things I know about Mama. So be it. Obviously, I wasn't much of a list maker back when I did that, because I certainly knew a lot more about my mother than just her name. I could have put down that she stood 5 feet tall on the dot and bare feet, and that she had the same pale blue eyes I do, only wider set. And I could have said she was beautiful and her hair was bone straight, not curly like mine, and parted in the middle so that it hung down like curtains on either side of her face. I know other things too, like she hated to wear socks, rainy days made her anxious, and she'd do almost anything you asked her if you promised a juji fruit after, as long as it wasn't a green one. Green is not a creative color. I could have put all of that down, and more. But like I said, it wasn't much of a list maker back then. I kept my lists in a red spiral notebook with dividers, and sometimes I wish I still had it to remind me of who I was before. After Bernadette brought up that business about my Grammy giving Mama an unpromising name, I started thinking about some things I hadn't thought about before. Who am I? I remember asking Bernadette one day in the kitchen. You are my sugar baby, my sugar baby doll, she sang in reply. No, Bernie, who am I really? I asked again. You're Heidi. Heidi it. Is that all? I said. That's plenty in my book. What do you need to be more than who you are right now? Shouldn't a person know their history? I asked. What is it you want to know? Bernie said. Lots of things. Such as, she said. Where was I born, and who named me Heidi? I asked. Maybe you were named after the book, or maybe the movie. Shirley Temple was in that. Oh, how I loved her movies. But who saw the movie, Mama? My Grammy? What difference does it make? Bernie said. A person isn't supposed to have to guess who they are. They're supposed to know, I said. You know who you are, Heidi, and you have a history too. Not from the beginning, I said, only from when Mama and I met you. What happened before that doesn't matter, baby. It's just something to be grateful for. Because if it hadn't happened, you and I wouldn't be standing here right now having this conversation. A person has the right to know from the beginning, I said. I suppose a person has a right to want to know, she said. It wasn't too long after that I decided to make a new list. Instead of things I knew about Mama, it would be a list of all the things I didn't know about her. There were so many. I had a feeling as I opened my notebook, this would turn out to be the longest list I'd ever made. I pictured it being so long that it would stretch to the moon and back again. I began in the usual way, by writing the heading on top. Things I don't know about Mama. And then I wrote the first thing that came to mind. What is Tzuf? And here's the funny thing. Once I wrote that, I couldn't go any further. I stared at the page for a long time, but all the other questions I'd thought of seemed small and unimportant compared to that one. What is Tzuf? The words grew louder in my head, and as I watched, the letters expanded and blurred together, spreading across the page and spilling over the edges like sweet milky tea, until the question became so vast that I could imagine it stretching to the moon and back again, all by itself. Chapter 5. Shh. When I was very little, before I could go outside, we had to have everything delivered. Groceries, clothes, everything. Mama couldn't shop by herself because she couldn't read or handle money, and I was way too young to go out alone with her. I think Bernadette liked it better that way. All of us staying inside together. Bernie was great on the phone. She could talk people into bending the rules and helping us out in all kinds of ways. Every now and then, somebody wasn't willing to bring us whatever it was we needed. And when that happened, whatever it was, we just did without. But Mama and I were the opposite of Bernadette. We wanted to go out. I used to sit on Mama's lap at the window, and we'd both laugh when the sparrows landed on the sill, or when cars honked their horns below on the street. Once I was old enough, I began to beg Bernie to let Mama and me out to do the shopping together. Eventually, she gave in. At first, we were only allowed to go places on our block because of the street crossing thing. Luckily, there was a Double D grocery store on the corner. Bernie would stand by the door, wringing her hands the whole time we were gone. But Mama and I loved the Double D. We liked to push the cart down the aisles and to taste the tiny sample cubes of yellow cheese or muffin that sometimes put out on the counters. On the way home, Mama and I held hands and laughed out loud at the pigeons scurrying away from us when we walked. I loved being out with Mama, but all that changed the day the vacuum cleaner broke. Our vacuum cleaner was an ancient metal tank with fins that looked like a rocket ship about to blast off. After it broke, Bernie called around and found out that nobody made that kind anymore, and only one store in Reno had the part we needed to fix it. They wouldn't send us the piece, and it was too far away to walk. So I begged Bernie to let me and Mama to take the bus. Pretty please with sugar on top, I pleaded. I had never taken the bus before, but I had seen them pass by under the window 1,000,000 times, and I was dying to ride on one. Bernie was reluctant, but badgered her until finally she showed me out the window where the bus stop was, and gave Mama and me enough change for 2 round trips. It's in a different neighborhood, Heidi. All strangers. Fly under the radar. Don't talk to anyone, don't even look at them, and you hold your Mama's hand the whole time. It's not safe. Do you understand me seriously? She told me nervously. It's not safe. Mama and I walked down the corner to wait for the bus. Despite all that Bernie had said, I wasn't afraid. I was excited. The number 5 commuter came around the corner and passed so close to us that it blew Mama's hair back away from her face and lifted her dress up above her knees. The brakes made a high-pitched squeaking noise, or at least that's what I thought it was, until I realized the sound was coming out of Mama's mouth. She was screaming, and when she began to sob and clutch at her chest, I grabbed her arm and tried to pull her down the sidewalk toward home. Bernadette had seen and was hanging out the window, yelling when we got there, "Get inside, Heidi! Hurry up, get inside!" People stopped to stare, and a woman in a big hat tried to grab my shoulder. "Do you need help, little girl?" she asked. "Do you want me to call the police?" Bernadette was waiting at the door with the juji fruits when we got upstairs, but Mama didn't even seem to see her. She rushed into the room and started walking in a circle, patting her chest rapidly with one hand. "Done, done, done, Heidi. Shh," she kept saying over and over. Bernadette tried to give her juji fruits, but Mama wouldn't take them. Done, 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 Heidi. Shh, Mama said again. Why is she doing that, I asked. Bernadette watched her for a minute, and then a sad, knowing look came over her face. She went to Mama and said very softly, Why don't you give me the baby, Precious? She'll be safe with me. Give her to me now, okay? What baby? I asked. What are you talking about, Bernie? Give me the baby, she said again to Mama. Give Heidi to me, Precious. Mama stopped pacing. Breathing heavily, she slowly extended her arms to Bernadette, who reached out and took the invisible baby from her. As soon as she had done that, Mama went out to the kitchen and lay down in the middle of the floor. She curled up and shut her eyes. What's happening? I asked Bernadette. I think maybe your Mama is having a memory, she said. You said give me Heidi. Is Mama remembering me? I asked. I'm not sure, honey lamb. Then Mama said something that neither of us could quite hear. I got down on the floor and leaned next to her, stroking her hair. What is it, Mama? I whispered. What do you remember? Tzuf, she whimpered softly. Tzuf. How can you tell if someone has memories if they can't talk about the things they remember? Mama remembered lots of things from one day to the next. How to make tea, where her toothbrush was, how to open cans. But did she remember her past? Her mother? The day I was born? My father? Maybe she had pictures of all those memories in her head, but she didn't have the words to describe them. Or maybe her broken machine had a little hole in the side, and all those memories had slipped through it like small round candies, rolling across the floor into dark corners or under the bed among the dust bunnies. All except one, that is. One memory was so important, Mama held on to it and gave it a word all its own to help her remember. Tzuf. I spent hours picturing that word, with all the answers to my unanswered questions tied to it, one after another, like the knotted ragtail of a kite. I'd imagine myself standing there on the ground, holding on to the ball of string while that word sailed and skidded and danced across the cloudless blue sky above me. But only Mama knew what it meant, and she wasn't telling. What is Tzuf, Mama? I'd whisper as I sat on the edge of her bed at night, gently scratching her back. I hoped it might slip out of her mouth and onto her pillowcase as she closed her eyes and relaxed into the rhythm of my scratching. Sometimes I'd sit down next to her on the couch, open up a magazine, flip through the pictures, pointing at things. A baby, a dog, a car. Show me Tzuf, Mama. Is this Tzuf? Is this? Mama would smile her sweet, wide smile and pat my knee the way she always did when I sat close to her. Tea, Heidi, she'd say. Tea? With anybody else, I might have thought offering to get me tea right then like that was a way of changing the subject, in order to avoid having to answer the question, like the time Xander offered to let me see the wart on his foot when what I'd asked him to show me was one of the medals he claimed his father had won in Vietnam. But I knew Mama didn't understand what I was asking. She could tell that I wanted something, and she didn't want to disappoint me. So she offered me one of the only things she was sure she could give me, tea. So I said, sure, Mama, I'd like some tea. And she said, good, Heidi, tea, and went off in the kitchen to make us 2 cups of Lipton, hers in the white cup with the gold rim, and mine in the one with pink roses, both with 3 spoons of sugar and a splash of milk, just the way Bernadette had taught her. But a million cups of Mama's sweet tea couldn't have washed away my longing for the meaning of that word. Before Bernadette had come down with her AP, she'd been a long-time fan of the library. She went there practically every day. I knew Bernie missed the library, so I was glad when I was finally able to walk the 3.5 blocks to go there for her. Mama would come too. She liked to look at the picture books. Before we stopped going out together, Mama and I went to the library at least once a week. Bernie made lists of the books she wanted me to take out for her to read, and she was also always having me look up things about hermit crabs or George Washington Carver or whatever else happened to be studying at school. Whenever I brought a new stack of books home, Bernie would press them to her nose, close her eyes, and breathe in deep, just like I'd seen her do with her father's old overcoat, which still hung in the hall closet in her apartment. After I started wondering about Tzuf, I asked Mrs. Koppelman, the librarian, if she'd ever heard of Mama's word, and she said it sounded like maybe it was foreign. She showed me where the international dictionaries were, and I looked it up in all of them. Nothing. I'd already looked up at home at MBF, of course, hoping to run my finger down the page and find it there among the other SOO words. Soon, soot, soothe, sooth. It wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere, except in Mama's head. I kept one ear cocked, listening for her to say it. On the rare occasions when she did, I'd pounce on it, looking for clues. Once she said it while she was watching Bernie brush the tangles out of my hair, watching Bernie pull the tangles out of my hair after a bath. Another time when she cut her finger on the lid of a can she was trying to open. But it wasn't consistent. I stood in front of her and brushed my hair a million times after that, trying to trigger it. But it didn't work. When it came without rhyme or reason. I spent hours looking into Mama's eyes, imagining that somewhere behind them was a little package, all wrapped up for me with a tag attached saying, "This is Tzuf." I started having trouble sleeping. Bernadette learned to steer clear of me when I was underslept. She'd been around enough cranky old cats to know how to avoid being scratched and hissed at. But when my upset started rubbing off on Mama and making her rimply, Bernadette lost patience and lit into me. "Heidi, I've said it before and I'll say it again. There are some things in life you just cannot know, and the meaning of that word of your mama's is one of them. The sooner you come to grips with that, the better it'll be for all of us." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to give up. Why did I think that word was so important anyway? For all I knew, it was nonsense. Some misremembered thing she'd overheard somebody say on the street. I told myself these things over and over, hoping to talk myself into believing them. Maybe I would have too, if I hadn't found the camera way in the back of the sticky bottom drawer in the kitchen, where we kept odds and ends like birthday candles and rubber bands. I was looking for Scotch tape and yanked the drawer open so hard the whole thing came crashing out onto the floor. And there it was. A black plastic Kodak Instamatic camera, and inside of it a roll of film. Used. My search for the truth began in earnest after I had that film developed. The day I came home with the pictures, Bernadette was sitting at the dining room table looking at a library book about marsupials. "I wish I had a pouch," she said. "Perfect for stashing reading glasses." I set the envelope of photos down in front of her. She closed the book without even bothering to save the place. "Tell the truth, Heidi," she said, picking up the yellow envelope and turning it over in her hands. "Did you peek at any of them on the way home?" "No. I was afraid to," I said. "What's the worst it could be?" she asked. "Nothing. The worst would be if there was nothing," I said. "Well, let's see what there is then, baby." And she said softly as she slid a finger under the flap and broke the seal. "Let's just see." So that is the next 2 chapters of Sob.it. I'm really excited to see what happens in the next couple chapters. I think going forward, the videos are going to be 2 chapters, as they are quite long, and it does seem to take some time to get through them. That being said, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited, again, to have shared part of this book with you. I hope you check in at the next video. I am uploading on Thursdays and Saturdays, so be sure to subscribe and hit the post notification if you'd like to know when my videos are being posted. Thanks so much for paying attention, and I will see you at the next video.